Welcome to the Parties channel. Today we explain Prophet Samuel 2, chapter 8 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We're going to look directly at the primary Hebrew text and break down exactly what is happening in this honestly fascinating chapter of biblical history. Just think about it for a second. David spent years, literally years, running for his life out in the wilderness, hiding in caves from King Saul. And now he isn't just a king over some small tribal nation, he is an emperor, actively building a massive dynasty that dominates the entire region. It's a huge shift. So let's thoroughly explore this explainer of his rapid expansion and consolidation. We're going to leave absolutely no stone unturned and, as always, no verse skipped.
Okay, real quick, here is our roadmap for today. Number 1, context and first victories. 2, conquering the north. 3, tributes and holy dedications. 4, victory in the south. 5, David's righteous administration. And finally, 6, life lessons and a recap.
All right, let's dive into part 1, context and first victories. This is all about securing the borders. But first, to really set the stage for this explainer, where exactly are we in the story right now? You might be wondering, why is this chapter suddenly just packed with back-to-back, super intensive military campaigns?
Well, David's kingship is now firmly established. If we look back just one chapter, to chapter 7, we see that David successfully brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. It was a huge moment, and there he received this massive, unconditional promise from the Lord regarding his eternal dynasty, what we call the Davidic covenant. So, with his spiritual and domestic house completely in order, his focus naturally shifts. It shifts strictly to securing his newly united kingdom from all those external enemies. Verse 1 tells us, in the course of time, David defeated the Philistines and subdued them. He is moving decisively here. He's got divine confidence, and he's neutralizing the surrounding threats that have frankly plagued the nation of Israel for centuries.
If we map out the text, it's actually incredible. We see the sweeping geographical narrative of how David completely secured his borders in every single direction. The author of the text practically organizes these campaigns by moving clockwise around Israel. He strikes first in the west, then moves to the east, pushes all the way up to the north, and finally marches south. It's this brilliant, strategic circle of defense and expansion. Let's start with that very first strike in the west.
Starting right in verse 1, the text says, David took Methegamah out of the hand of the Philistines. Now, the Philistines were Israel's oldest, most persistent enemy to the west, situated right along the Mediterranean coast. Methegamah, I know it's a difficult Hebrew term, but it translates roughly to the bridle of the mother city. Basically, it represents a critical stronghold of control, likely the major city of Gath. By ripping this primary stronghold out of their hands, David doesn't just win a little skirmish, right? He effectively breaks their dominance. He ends centuries of oppression and secures his western flank once and for all. It's a real game changer.
Then, moving east in verse 2, David defeats Moab. The text tells us plainly, and it's pretty intense, that he made the defeated Moabites lie down on the ground and measured them off with a cord. 2 lengths of them were put to death, and 1 full length was kept alive. It is a stark, brutal picture of ancient warfare and absolute subjugation. The end result is that the surviving Moabites, located just across the Jordan River to the east, they become subjects to David, and they start bringing him tribute. This means they literally became a vassal state. They're forced to pay regular, heavy taxes to the Israeli crown, which drastically shifts the economic and political power of David's growing empire.
Moving on to part 2, conquering the north. This takes us up toward the Euphrates and Aram.
In verses 3 and 4, the conflict scales up massively. David confronts Hadadezer, the son of Rehob, king of Zobah. Now, this is located unbelievably far to the north, stretching all the way toward the Euphrates River. Hadadezer was actually marching to restore his own monument of control along the Euphrates when David intercepted him. And the text tells us David captured an immense, honestly terrifying force from him. We're talking 1,000 chariots, 700 horsemen, and a staggering 20,000 foot soldiers. 20,000! This wasn't some local tribal skirmish. This was a massive, conventional, ancient world army, and David successfully met it and utterly defeated it.
Following this victory, the text mentions a very specific action. It says David howed, or hamstrung, the chariot horses. That means cutting their leg tendons so they could no longer pull chariots in battle. Now you might be asking, why on earth would he do this instead of just keeping them for his own army? Well, in ancient times, chariots were the ultimate weapons of war. They were literally the modern tanks of the battlefield. Israel's army, on the other hand, was primarily infantry. But deeper than that, embedded right in the Torah, in Deuteronomy chapter 17, God specifically commanded that Israel's kings must not multiply horses for themselves.
Why? To ensure they rely entirely on God and not on advanced military technology. So David dismantles this weaponry, he keeps exactly 100 for ceremonial use, but decisively neutralizes the threat while, most importantly, honoring God's law.
So then, when the Arameans of Damascus marched down to try and intervene and help Hadadezer, David's tactical dominance just shines right through again. Verse 5 tells us David struck down 22,000 of these Aramean reinforcements, no small feat. Then, in verse 6, he places garrisons. These are permanent military occupation forces right there in the Aramean kingdom of Damascus. These occupation forces were there to ensure that the local population remained subdued and that those heavy tribute taxes were collected and sent right back to Jerusalem. Just like Moab, the Arameans become his subjects. David has now completely shattered and subdued the formidable Northern Alliance. Okay, this brings us to an absolutely crucial point in verse 6. In fact, it is truly the central theological theme of this entire chapter. It's this exact powerful phrase, "The Lord gave victory to David whithersoever he went." The author literally pauses the recounting of all these massive military strikes, just stops the narrative, to make sure we, the readers, understand the real force behind these conquests. It is not just David's sheer military genius. It's not just his army's strength. It is direct divine backing, fulfilling the very promises God made to him. Whithersoever he went, the absolute victory came from God.
Let's look at part 3, tributes and holy dedications, the spoils of war.
Verses 7 through 10 detail an incredible accumulation of wealth. David takes the gold shields carried by the officers of Hadadezer and he brings them straight to Jerusalem. From the towns of Betha and Berothai, he confiscates an exceeding quantity of bronze. Then we meet Toi, the king of Hamath. When Toi hears that David decimated the entire army of Hadadezer, he is absolutely thrilled. Because in the ancient world, you know how it goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Hadadezer had been aggressively warring with Toi for a long time. So Toi voluntarily sends his son Joram to King David to congratulate him, and he brings lavish tribute gifts of silver, gold, and bronze articles, effectively submitting to David's regional dominance without even fighting.
But here is what's so amazing about David's character in this moment. Instead of hoarding all this unimaginable wealth for his own personal luxury or vanity or some massive palace expansion, David intentionally dedicates it all to the Lord. Verse 11 explicitly says, "King David dedicated these articles to the Lord, as he had done with the silver and gold from all the nations he had subdued." Think about that. Every single ounce of silver, gold, and bronze stripped from Edom, Moab, the Ammonites, the Philistines, Amalek, and all the immense plunder from Hadadezer, all of it is set apart as holy. David is actively stockpiling these precious materials not for his own glory, but for the future temple that his son Solomon will eventually build. He's playing the long game for God's kingdom.
All right, part 4, victory in the south, subduing Edom.
Looking at verses 13 and 14, David secures his final geographic border. The text says David became famous after he returned from striking down 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. This is a harsh, arid region located just south of the Dead Sea. And just as he did way up north with Damascus, David establishes military garrisons throughout all of Edom to maintain strict, unbreakable control. So now all the Edomites become subjects to David. The geographical compass is perfectly complete, guys. The west, the east, the north, and the south are fully secured, and they are all paying regular tribute.
And check this out. Here's that exact same quote again from verse 14, deliberately repeated by the text to firmly cement the idea that David's expansion is completely divinely backed. The Lord gave victory to David whithersoever he went. I really want you to reflect on how incredibly unusual this is for ancient Near Eastern texts. Ordinarily, right, kings in this era inscribed massive stone monuments attributing all victories solely to their own brilliant might and power. They bragged. But the Hebrew text is the exact opposite. It deliberately pauses again to give all the credit for this unprecedented political and military success directly to God.
Part 5. David's righteous administration. Looking at the internal structure.
Now, there is a really fascinating contrast here that is just core to understanding David's reign. On the outside, when he's facing foreign threats, he is a fierce, utterly ruthless warrior. We just read about him hamstringing enemy horses, executing captives by a strict measuring line, and striking down tens of thousands of men in brutal hand-to-hand combat. But internally? Well, internally, verse 15 explicitly notes he ruled with a completely different, benevolent demeanor. It says David reigned over all Israel, doing what was just and right for all his people. He acts as a fierce lion to Israel's enemies, for sure, but as a protective, righteous judge to his own citizens.
Verses 16 through 18 meticulously break down David's royal cabinet. Let's just walk through these specific names and titles, because it's important. We've got Joab, the son of Zeruiah. He's the commander over the entire standing army. Then there's Jehoshaphat, the son of Ahilud, who is the recorder. That's essentially the official historian or chancellor. Zadok and Ahimelech serve as the high priests, managing the religious life of the whole nation. Seraiah is the secretary or scribe, handling all the complex state documents. Benaiah is put over a very specific military group. And finally, David's own sons serve as chief ministers. So why does all this matter? Well, because having a formal recorder and a scribe marks a massive historical transition for Israel. They are shifting from a loose, kind of chaotic group of tribes into a highly organized, bureaucratic empire.
Just to clarify a somewhat tricky Hebrew term from that cabinet list, the Cherethites and Pelethites were David's elites, fiercely loyal personal bodyguards. Commanded by Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, these men operated completely outside the regular national army that was commanded by Joab. They answered directly to the king alone. They ensured his personal security and carried out his direct, absolute orders. What is historically surprising and honestly pretty fascinating is that many scholars believe the Cherethites and Pelethites were actually foreign mercenaries. They were likely related to the Philistines, hired specifically because they had no local tribal loyalties to anyone but King David himself.
Finally, Part 6, Life Lessons and Recap. How do we apply the text?
So what does this all mean for us? We learn a really profound lesson today. To dedicate our successes to a higher purpose. Just exactly like David did with those immense spoils of war. He didn't let unprecedented wealth turn into personal vanity. Instead, he deeply recognized the true source of his victory and dedicated everything back to the Lord. Furthermore, we learn the critical importance of balancing strength with fairness. Being strong and fiercely protective against external threats while simultaneously executing true justice and righteousness for the people relying on you internally. But as we look at this absolute peak of David's power, a lingering, pretty provocative question remains. Can a man who wields such absolute military might and vast, staggering wealth truly maintain his righteousness? Or will the crushing weight of the crown eventually crack his moral foundation? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.